正真中宗第77則三仏やは五層の縁三仏一手紙にはべしてやわすカエルに及んでともしびすでに滅す恩中において曰く百王の一天号を下せ武漢曰く西方単勝に舞う仏言曰く鉄が心に横たう仏家曰く却下を見よ縁曰く我が主を滅する者はすなわち国言のみ。Entangling Vines, Case 77. Three Buddhas' Night Talk. One evening, as Goso Hoen's three disciples, Bukan Egon, Butsugen Seon, and Buka Kokugon, were attending Goso at an inn, they and the master talked so late that when it came time to leave, the lamps were already out. In the darkness, Goso said, "Each of you give me a turning phrase." Bukan said, "A radiant phoenix dances in the sky." Butsugen said, "An iron snake lies across the ancient road." Buka said, "Watch where you step." Goso commented, "Only Buka will destroy my teachings." Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
This is not day one anymore. Time has elapsed, and already the schedule we are following has brought us to the part where we realize that repetition of the schedule stops. You have already eaten your last lunch of this session. It's quite interesting to see how our relationship to thinking about that changes. There might have been some place, some time in the last days that you thought, I can't wait to get out of here. And now that the last lunch has gone, there's this, and we start to engage in the delusion, oh, I could just go on for another 7 days. No delusion here. Yeah. But sometimes one feels like that. Yeah. Time passes like an arrow. We read it today in English. Koin yanogotoshi. Koin is really, it's translated as time, but it means light and darkness. Light and darkness together is like that change between light and darkness indicates the changing of times, that how we know it. At night it is dark, at least in these latitudes where we live. And during the day, usually it is light. And when it changes, we know and we recognize the functioning of not change, but then we abstract it and we call it time. Time. There's nothing wrong with that. This is how our two-dimensional mind works. It can only use the tools it has. And so it thinks of it as time. But as we heard before, as I had expressed, as one expression of how we can relate to non-duality with the example of light and darkness. When it's light, it's light. When it's dark, it's dark. So non-duality doesn't mean there is not darkness and light. It's not the great equalizer that blends everybody into a like grayish, yucky substance that has no taste and that would not be worthwhile living for. No, non-duality is the concentration of our presence in this very unfolding of the activity of Dharma that brings whatever it brings. It brings delicious experiences of levity. It brings horribly heavy feelings of loss, of suffering at times. But whatever is there, is there. And so, in this English translation of the Kozen Daito Kokushi Yuikai, the last admonition of Daito Kokushi, we hear, it's good to know what is said at times, and him pointing at that, well, don't come to this temple because you need a roof over your head or because you need food. Come here for the sake of the way and face the inconceivable around the clock while you're here. And that hasn't changed. Shuko-san's and my ordination teacher, Joshu Roshi, at the end of the training period, which was called Seichu, he would give his last talk from his very high seat. And he would say to the monks, well, if you want to leave, leave. But if you want to stay here, I want you to be sure that you stay here to continue to practice as hard as you can. If you don't do that and you just stay here, then this monastery is nothing but a human trash dump. So, it is also notable, that sometimes people come to places like this place here and find it as a good container for some time, and some even overstay their welcome. And it's not such a great container anymore, maybe for them, but not for the community. And if one lives in a structure like this for a very, very long time, changes happen. Even after the first kind of 3-month, 90-day kind of training period, when one goes out back into the world, you walk down Main Street and suddenly you find yourself walking in Kinin. And why are these people looking at me so funny? What's wrong? Oh, yeah. And, that's how it is. And when you hail a cab, you don't have to bow to the cabbie. But stuff like that becomes so much your nature. And it's important then to learn how to translate that into the appropriate way of communicating exactly the same thing. At the cashiers, you don't bow to cashiers. Say, hey man, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. That's just what is meant to be instilled in these very, very strictly circumscribed circumstances we work in here. It's the function again. The function will change with the conditions in which we find ourselves here in the world, but always in this moment. So, why is he saying that? What does that have to do with this koan here, It's a fantastic koan, It's wonderful. When you read it, you might think, it's one of those completely over-the-top Zen things that make absolutely no sense. And the thinking that koans are riddles that are you can't understand with your thinking mind, it's not always true. That would be just too flat. Koans are like little pills of homeopathic medicine that come with all kinds of things in it, And they are meant to allow us to get a specific taste, to look at the specific facet of this wonderful universe and our lives here, and to really penetrate into that and see in the specific manifestation of what it is the entirety. Seeing and experiencing the cosmos in a single grain of sand. That is what koans help with. And sometimes we also fall into the mistaken approach that koans are it's like abstracting things even more, transcending, higher, 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 higher. But often it's the opposite. It's asking for more concrete, more graspable, more guts, less brain. So this here is one of those koans that has many aspects of that. And some of them can be understood because they are teaching tools as well. They come from a long-standing tradition, not only a literary tradition that teaches about using words in a specific way, but also from a tradition of using metaphors and from a tradition of practice. So the Three Buddhas Night Talk is really a wonderful story. It's a real wonderful story because it also opens up and shows a different side. Everybody in this story has a name. There is no monk, There is nobody here who is incognito or anonymous. These are 4 people with names. And the title is called Three Buddhas Night Talk. Why 3 Buddhas, you might ask? It's because the 3 students, the 3 Dharma seekers who appear here, Bukkan Egon, Butsugen Seon, and Bukka Kokugon, their Dharma names share the first character. And the first character is? Anyone look at the board? Yeah? Anybody recognize the first character? It is Buddha. Buddha. So they have all Dharma names that start with Buddha. So Bukkan means Dharma, Buddha eye. Butsugen means Buddha mirror. And Bukka means Buddha fruit. Buddha fruit. And Goso Hoen is the teacher. That's why it's called the Three Buddhas Night Talk. And for those of us who go to New York Zendo, this might be an interesting koan to consider. Because it says here, one evening, as Goso Hoen's three disciples, Bukkan, Butsugen, and Bukka, were attending Goso at an inn. At an inn, not a temple. You know, they went to Bedford Falls, which is the bar across from Shoboji. They were sitting there, and they were talking. They were talking late. They were talking so late that the bartender had to do the last call and basically kick them out. When it came time to leave, it is translated here like the lamps were already out. That is a very literal translation. If we make it into a story that is a little more elaborate, let's see what that means. Last call. After the last call, that inn closes down, they go out, they light their lanterns to go back to the temple, which may or may not be in stumbling distance. I don't think they were drinking milk at the inn late. So there they go, keeping each other erect as much as possible. They help the teacher home, and suddenly comes the wind. The golden wind comes and blows out those candles in the lamps, like the lamp that we had for Kentan, where the three sides are closed and one side is open. The wind gets in really, really easily. Goes in and here we have those four folks standing in the pitch dark night. At that time, there were no street lights. And if there were, they were in town, and they already had gone outside of the town to come to the monastery. So somewhere between here and the gatehouse, a moonless night, little bit inebriated, it gets suddenly dark. It's a wonderful metaphor, isn't it? For what happens to us in our lives at times, you know. And even with that, and even with having paid respects to the gods of wine, Goso Hoen asks his students a question, you know. So what did he say? While they were standing there frozen and thinking, oh crap, what now? Hoen asked, so when we walk down this road on a dark night, we need light. But that light has just gone out. Now, tell me, boys, you know, tell me, what will you do in this darkness? Still adhering to his teaching job, you know? When he talks about darkness and the path, of course, he's not talking about the path that leads to the monastery or the darkness that came to be by the candles being blown out. What kind of darkness is that? Further and further into the darkness, right? The darkness of ignorance. Every time we chant the Hanya Haramita Shingyo, the Heart Sutra. We come to the part where it says mu myo. Mu myo. The mu is the regular mu. No light. Mu myo means really no light. It is the characters that were chosen by the first translators from Sanskrit or Pali into the Chinese language for the word avijja, which is ignorance. Ignorance. No ignorance and no end to ignorance. Mu myo. So really he is asking about that. There we are standing together in this darkness. Bukkan, Butsugen, and Engo. Now let's see who they are. Bukkan Egon lived from 1059 until 1117 and only appears in this one case of the Shumon-kattoshu. He was a native of a place in the present Anhui province in China, and his family name was Wang. He became a Dharma successor to Goso Hoen, along with the other two, Butsugen and Bukka. And they are the three Buddhas of Goso Hoen. Besides that, really, Bukkan Egon doesn't appear really in many other places. This is the main point where we know him from. The other one, Butsugen Seon, born a little bit later, 8 years later, in 1067, who lived until 1120, Buddha Mirror, appears in 3 cases of this Shumon-kattoshu. And he was from present-day Sichuan province. His family name was Li. He was like most of the Zen people at that time. At age 14, he devoted himself to the study of the Vinaya, the rules, and the Lotus Sutra. The Lotus Sutra, which we heard a little bit about yesterday from Jishin Sensei, and which we so wonderfully chanted the chapter 25 on day 4 in Banka. It's not very often that at Daibusatsu Zendo the full Lotus Sutra is chanted. Again, where I was trained, we chanted that thing twice a day. Every day, twice, in its full length. And if you do that long enough, you become that chapter. You become that chapter. And it's a wonderful thing to know a sutra so well that you can't make it happen. You let it unfold out of your having been exposed to it. As soon as you start thinking, you cannot remember anything. It's not that you remember the syllables or what. It is just coming out of you from like the echo of that sound that you have heard so many times. It's a wonderful thing. So he studied the Lotus Sutra. And one day he encountered a passage in the Lotus Sutra that said, this law is not something that can be understood through pondering or analysis. So he went to his teacher and said, Master, could you please explain that to me? And the teacher said, no, I can't. I can't explain that to you. Maybe you should go and see one of those New Age people at the time, the Zen people. Okay. He realized the limits of this doctrinal study and turned to the practice of Zen. He visited several masters, and finally he joined under Goso Hoen and became also a Hassu, a Dharma successor. That leaves only one person. The third Buddha here is Bukka Kokugon, who's mostly known as Engo Kokugon. It's the guy before the page turn of the Teidai Dempo Busso no Myogo Engo Kokugon, right? He appears in many cases. There are 11 cases here in this Shumon Kato Shu, and he lived from 1063 until 1135. And also he came from Sichuan, and his surname was Luo. His family was a family that was deeply steeped in Confucian scholarship. And at that time when Buddhism arrived in China, that Confucian scholarship has been there for how many years? About 1,000 years. The historical Buddha and Confucius lived about the same time. And it took 1,000 years before Buddhism came to China. So this Engo, by being so studious and this family really rearing him in a way that made him able to read early in his life and study the analects and all of that, he was able to memorize a text of 1,000 characters in a single day. And after learning all of that, he still felt unfulfilled by the strong connection with Buddhism after visiting a temple and reading several Buddhist texts. And he became a monk, devoted himself to the study of Buddhist thought, and it took illness for him to realize that, well, no matter how much I read of this, will it cure my illness of still not knowing what all of this is about and what this problem of samsara needs to be resolved? Reading only brings us so far. Studying is a good thing to inform ourselves, but eventually we have to fill those words that we read with our own experience, with our own having tasted what they express. And that is only possible by actually doing some kind of a practice. And when we chant fast, when we chant the Diamond Sutra, and it's not anymore just a string of nonsensical individual syllables that we try to pick off the page and put in our mouth and spit it out as fast as possible. When it starts to turn into like a dance movement that effortlessly perception, brain telling the breath to exhale and putting the tongue in a specific position, positioning the lips and doing that in this really thing. If we would think about it, it wouldn't be possible. But by giving ourselves to this partially physical, partially mental and partially emotional process, we experience and have the ability to be in this samadhi of chanting that is fully aware but has no self-referential thought. As soon as you have self-referential thought, you're lost. You're lost. And it happens to all of us. So even study of the sutras like that is a different kind of study. It's an experiential first-hand study of what it means. And when you talk about Dharanis to begin with, oh, I wonder what Chishusa, Shushiri means. You know what it means? Chishusa, Shushiri, Sohaja. Or even Haza. You know, all these things are expressed in that, in a wonderful way, in a way that has nothing to do with thinking, you know? So, next time you get to that, it's really elating, yeah. Hasa, you know. So he got sick. Engo Kokugong got very sick. I have to go and sit after that. He took up meditation. There's the Zen school, which was very, very clever. The Zen school appeared relatively late. There was Buddhism already for several hundred, maybe 200 years or so, and that's why there was a lot of study, a lot of translation of the sutras and so on. But here's the Zen school in a marketplace that is already crowded with all different other brands of Buddhism. And so in order to open their own franchise business, they had to come with a business plan that is taking care of the market conditions and of the way how the culture was. And one really group of people was really genius in terms of marketing here. We are in a Confucian society. What is Confucianism? One of the main staples is filial piety and revering your ancestors, you know? Our school goes back directly to the Buddha. There were 28 people in India of transmission, and then Bodhidharma came here. And ancestral teachers here that have this unbroken lineage. Who knows if it's true? We don't know if it's true, but most marketing that promises us something in ads, you know, it's not necessarily true, you know? There might be a little disclaimer, but in this case, you know what? It worked. It worked, and we still have this filial piety, ancestral kind of lineage thing in it, because it's more than just an idea of legitimizing ourselves. It is this wonderful transmission of the spark of life, of human consciousness. And for that we can say it is unbroken. If it were broken, what would we be? Corpses. Yeah. But we are alive. Are we? Yes, we are. Haza! We are alive. And so Engo went and started, and he found several teachers. Most of them were easy paths. Oh yeah, you understand. You understand already. But he wasn't still himself satisfied. So he ended up with Goso Hoen eventually. And Goso did not sanction him. And the practice wasn't to his liking. So Engo said, see you later. I find another place. So as he was leaving, quite angry, Engo was angry because he was not used to being rejected. Goso called out after him, not angry, remember me when you are ill. Soon afterward, at a different temple, what happened to Engo? He got sick again. And as he was lying there in his bed, manifesting moon-faced Buddha in agony, he heard Goso, "Remember me when you are ill." And immediately he thought, I have to go back. He returned, he stuck with it, and succeeded to Goso Hoen's Dharma. He became well known, had many, many students, and many important government officials studied with him. And while going around and lecturing, giving talks at various temples, he started talking about 100 ancient cases that were put together by a person called Secho Juken. And later these talks were he put together in a compendium that he called the Blue Cliff Record, Hekigan Roku. Die Niederschrift von der smaragdenen Felswand. That's what the German translation says. And the funny thing is that I point out here always is that the first translation of this, I think in the Western language, was into German. And the translator, his name was Wilhelm Gundert. Wilhelm Gundert, he was a sinologist and Japanologist. And the really interesting thing is, he was the cousin of the author Hermann Hesse, who wrote Siddhartha. If you ever read Siddhartha in the original, and if you see the first printing, there are two parts. And the second part, it says on the top, dedicated to my cousin in Japan. And that was Wilhelm Gundert, who translated the Hekigan Roku into German. Wonderful connections everywhere, everywhere. So he received the purple robe from the emperor and the title Zen Master Bukka, Bukka Zenji, Buddha fruit. The next emperor gave him another name, and that was Engo. That's how we know him. Engo Kokugong had 16 Dharma heirs, and of these the two best known were Daye Soko, and the other one is Kokyo Joryo. Kokyo Joryo, we know that is the first guy on the other side of the page turn. So through this Kokyo, Engo is an ancestor to all present-day Rinzai Zen masters of the Japanese lineages. So here, they're still standing in the dark. The teacher has challenged them. Here it is translated as, each of you give me a turning phrase. A turning phrase is a saying, an expression that somehow unlocks some understanding that is fresh, is authentic, and delicious, sparkly. So in the dark, Bukkan said, a radiant phoenix dances in the sky. If this were a game show, a sound like this would be happening. A wonderful picture. Radiant phoenix dances in the sky, which is, I am told by the sinologists, that is an expression of a good omen. The radiant phoenix dances in the sky. It could also just be that he looked up at the stars and the radiant phoenix dances in the sky, looking up. Next contestant, Butsugu, says, an iron snake lies across the ancient road. He says, an iron snake. What color would that snake be? What color? Black. Yeah. Iron is, unless you polish it, it's black. So the iron snake is the darkness. The darkness lies across the ancient road. And what does the road become? Unpassable. Impassable. We are stuck. Snakes, yeah. The iron snake lies across the ancient road. Ignorance lies upon the road of our lives until we have to unstuck ourselves and develop the ability to tell the difference between a rope and a snake lying across the path. It's very, very helpful to know that. Of course, at Mount Baldy in California, there are rattlesnakes. And sometimes they cross the path. The Kinhin path there is outside. It used to be a Boy Scout camp. It's a big circle, and in the middle is a fire circle with big tree. And so you walk around, it's single file, it's dusty. You use a rope to hike up your skirt, as it is in the Japanese monks do. Also, when the keisaku is carried, yeah? A rope, and you pull your rope up. Your rope so you can easier walk. And everybody walks. So from the point of view of a rattlesnake that were lying there, the snake could just lie there and see those calves come by. And which one shall I bite? But fortunately, rattlesnakes are nice snakes. They warn you. They say, I'm here. Don't step on me, you know? But the iron snake really didn't do it either. Goso didn't say anything. Finally, Bukka Engokokugun said, watch where you step. How practical. Huh? How practical. Kan kyakka. So I took this from the Genkan, because this is what you find in the Genkans at the entrances of Zen monasteries. This is the characters of what he says. Kan kyakka, or kyakka omi. Watch your step. And it's not hanging there because there's a step to the outside. It doesn't say, please don't trip. It doesn't say, our lawyers say, walk carefully. No, this is much, much more. Kan kyakka. In the pitch darkness, Engo says, watch your step. This is what we are doing here. While we might find ourselves in the darkness of ignorance. Literally, it means look at your feet. Quite different than, oh, beautiful stars in the sky. Oh man, we are stuck here. That's the second answer. Look at your feet. Watch where you step. It's pitch black, it's dark and dangerous. So let's watch our steps carefully as we go in that darkness. Ding! The bell rings. This is the winning answer. And Goso comments, only Buddha will destroy my teachings. Now this is a typical Zen flavor again. This sounds like derogatory, right? This guy here, he will mess everything up I did. But it's the highest praise a Zen person can get. As a teacher, Goso Hoen was charged with, like every Zen lineage holder is charged with creating successors whose understanding and expression outshines their own. And so saying this guy will render my teachings useless and destroy them is a real heartfelt, deep, admiring comment. It's, yeah, that's right. That's it. That's right. So if the lights suddenly go out on a dark road at night, what is the first thing we should do? Here and now. It's nice to look at the stars, but don't start walking. Beach a lake. One true nature. Have you ever tried to swim in robes? Don't. It's even swimming in clothes. There are courses where you can go to experience that, so you really understand what it means to fall into the water fully dressed. So there's people stripping before they jump in to rescue somebody. There is some real utility behind that. So, but walking in the dark, do not look anywhere else than each step. And wherever you step, be very careful. Tread lightly. Tread lightly. And how many steps can you take at a time? One step. Pay close attention to your step so you don't stumble. It means to look closely at ourselves in this practice. As we strut around in our lives, is our head in the clouds? Are we moving or are we stuck? Look carefully at your feet. We can't walk anywhere without stepping on something, you know? Another teaching that we find in here is that in order to move, we must step somewhere. So make sure where we step, we don't consciously step on something and on the other hand, even if you step on clear ground, I'm sure there is something that is being squished. And learning how to reconcile that is part of that. Watch your step. And be aware that stepping on this earth means to be harmful. Reduce the footprint of that harm as much as possible. As we look at our feet, we look at the shortcomings of ourselves, of our lives at the same time. We discover our own places where there's still time to continue to make choices, to act in a more compassionate, in a clearer, and in a benevolent way. Watch your step in the monastery is see where does your thinking take you. Watch those steps. See where your kinhin takes you. Have you walked outside? Have you noticed the various colors of the boards, the leaves in your peripheral vision? When you sit outside, where do the steps of your perception take you? Are you stuck to the label of the airplanes that you hear flying, or are they truly flying through you? All of this in this very little koan. Each of you give me a turning phrase. Is a charge for each of us to do that with all actions we set in this world. Let it be something that is. That makes a difference. That is original. That is authentic. That is enlightening with lightness and light. We'll return that to the entrance, where it is facing outward. When you formally arrive at the Zen monastery, as somebody who wants to become a monk, you undergo a procedure of being told to go away. First you come, you bow, you have your whole bundle there, and you call for somebody inside the monastery with a teito bow. Tanomimasu! And from the inside, Dore! Somebody comes out and looks at your paper and says, thank you very much, but we have absolutely no room, even if that is the only monk living there. Please leave now. So the coming in is a very, very long process. First you are there, and then they feed you, then they put you in a tangazume, into one room where you can sit by yourself, you know. And it's just a test. Do you really want that? And I think some of our folks here who did that here at Daibusatsu Zendo can attest to even our modified version of being something where, yeah, well, there's such a thing as second thoughts. So that's how you come in through the Genkan. And if you formally leave, you also leave through the Genkan. And this here is facing to the outside and is the last thing you see before you go out into the world. And it tells you, watch your step. With that in mind, even if you don't leave through the Genkan, please keep that saying in your heart, keep that saying in your heart mind, so that there is some difference made by having come here, having had the good fortune to sit next to each other, to share meals, to share chanting, to share brief rests at night. And when we do that, then this truly is a transformative practice. Thank you for having come. We at Daibusatsu Zendo feel very grateful for your effort, for your dedication, and even if you become deeply, deeply awakened, please come back. We'll be here, ready to tell you, watch your step.